We're back, and it's you.
It's me. Look at that.
Perfect. I didn't even know that, and you're sitting next to me this whole time. Well, we want to introduce Christian. Christian Haywood is a film director based in London. He has worked with a variety of brands, bands, and institutions in producing emotional and engaging content. He was a first-class honors BA in film studies from Queen Mary University in London and has studied film production at the National Film and Television School. So welcome, Christian. So great that you can join us. Like, what time is it right now over there?
It's currently 20 to 11. So not too bad.
Not super bad. You got off a little bit easy compared to some of our guests.
Well, Christian, thank you so much for joining us. And let me be the first of many, well, actually many other people have said it in the chat, but vocally to say how amazing that film was. I absolutely just love the way that, you've started out with a great sort of jazz comedy. And I love the perspectives of the pets. And then of course it gives us this really lovely, very Stephen King kind of twist right at the end that makes everybody just go, what was I just watching there?
My face was like, what?
I think it also speaks really well to the Dollar Baby concept in general too, right? It's a tight little 9-minute film. It tells the story exactly the way we would want to be able to experience it. This one is one of the Stephen King stories I'm a little less familiar with. I totally remember reading it, but it was really great to be able to revisit this concept through you. So I just was curious to know if you could kind of take us a little bit through what made you choose this one, how did you put your cast together? I'll just turn it over to you, and then let us know sort of how we got to this place right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you for your kind words, and thank you for everyone in the YouTube chat. I was watching along with you, and it's the first time that I've been able to watch it with an audience.
Really?
So being able to people say that they found it funny and they found it heartbreaking that means so much to me. So thank you very much for that. This was actually the film that we were making as part of our final year project at university. So we had to make a 10-minute short film, and I'd heard of the Dollar Baby program, and I'm obviously a big Stephen King fan. So I thought, yeah, if we're going to do it, let's do it now. And I just read all of the short stories really, and this was the one that I was like, man, there's something about this that that really appeals to me. And before this, I'd only really directed comedy. So the fact that it's such a funny story, and King has done a reading of it himself, and it's hilarious the way he reads it. But at the same time, there's also that darkness to it, and also just the heartbreak of it, and how really hard to watch it is, really hard to read it is. So all of those things really kind of really appealed to me. So I made it with some of my fellow students. Our producer was Joe Deeks. Our director of photography was Ivy Rakovic, who's watching now, I think. And then we also had Jesse Cox was our sound designer. And when casting it, we were very specific about the quality that we wanted both LT, both characters to have. And we found Nick Popple and Sarah Gain in our auditioning process. And not only do they have an amazing chemistry together, but I think they both really got to the heart of those characters. And also the funny thing that we didn't intend is that they both kind of look like the opposite animal as well. So it was a really wonderful little bit of accidental casting, and they did an absolutely amazing job.
No, they certainly did. On the casting front, I was curious about the fact that, I mean, obviously you're from London and it's being filmed there, but you chose an American, at least, I don't know whether the actor was American or not, but an American narrator, or at least a non-Brit narrator sounding voice. And was that a conscious choice? Oh, well, obviously it was, but I mean, what led you to make that choice, or was it just the audition was so great?
To be honest, this was I don't remember Victor's audition. I remember when I was writing the screenplay, this narrator is omniscient as well as he is in the short story. Although I guess in the short story, he's sort of a friend telling this story, whereas in this story, he is kind of like a much more kind of all-knowing sort of figure, and that knowing wink that he gives to the camera at the end. And when Victor came in and did an audition, it was somebody that Joe had worked with before. I think his voice is just absolutely perfect, and the fact that he was American for me meant that what if this is King? What if this is Stephen King, kind of like giving a little wink nudge at the end, as audacious as that might be. So that was kind of my fan theory for my own film. But it was just, his voice was so perfect for it, and he's got such a great knowing look about him, and he did such a great job.
Oh, absolutely. And I honestly think that it improves it, having it be a very different kind of vocal quality, because it does exactly what you were talking about. It kind of brings him out of being a character, although we see him in the house at the end, and more of an omniscient kind of, almost, it's weird because this is not really Dark Tower related, but it kind of reminded me a little bit of Randall Flagg, like that kind of character that will suddenly show up in these situations and is manipulating it slightly, but we don't really know what's going on. There was just something about that for me that rang that way for sure.
Yeah, he definitely has that trickster kind of vibe to him, which totally came from him. Yeah, just a great performance, and added so much more than I'd originally intended. And I can totally see the Randall Flagg connection as well.
And so you really laid into the comedy aspects of it, which obviously everybody has really enjoyed. Had you intended right from the beginning to like? I mean, I just love that scene where the cat's in the kitchen and the things are flying up over the counter, and I mean, like, was that? Did you know going in that you were going to push it that far, or was that some stuff that kind of organically happened while you were filming?
No, I think we knew from the start that it was going to be that comedic. I mean, the short story is hilarious, but it's very American. I think the short story, and I think it's got that a very American sensibility to it. Whereas when we were adapting it, we were kind of giving it this slightly more maybe whimsical sense to it, and that was where we were like throwing in the kind of Monty Python type with the pans flying everywhere. That was a lot of fun to figure out, and all the whip pans and the quick cuts and stuff like that. And I think what we knew we needed to do is to make it so overtly comedic at the start that when it becomes more dramatic towards the end, that shift is really noticeable, and you really feel that, and you realize there's a sort of darker undertone to this whole story.
Absolutely. Do we have any Twitter?
Of course we do.
Okay.
But I just want to say, I think you've started a divide in our YouTube chat of people actually being like Team Cat, Team Dog. Do you see that often when you're someone watches your film or something? Like, fuck dogs.
Man, the whole process was just that whole thing. And before going into this film, I was not a pet person at all. I was not big on dogs, wasn't big on cats either. And weirdly, this film really turned me around on them rather than kind of creeping me out a bit more. But yeah, and the dog was a friend of mine's dog, and she was very gracious in letting us use that. But the cat we found online, and it was somebody who was
just a rentable cat?
It was essentially a rentable cat, yeah. Someone who was kind of happy to have their cat be in a film for a day.
That's incredible.
And yeah, there's a lot of divide. There's a lot of divide between the cat and the dog people.
Yeah, I was going up there. Team dog and guinea pigs.
I'd just like to jump in too, because in the doctor's case, which we'll watch a little bit later today, obviously we worked with a number of cats as well, to varying degrees of success and some really magical things. And obviously there's a trope in the movies that you should never work with children or animals. We've had lots of children in these dollar babies, and now we've got some animals too. What was your experience working with them? I know you said that you told us where you got them, but were they really easy to work with, or did you have to get up to some tricks to make them do the things you needed them to?
So many tricks. Oh, this was 2 years ago, and I don't think those days of filming are ever going to leave me. And like you say, children or animals. And I'd done a short film a couple of years before this where we had two children. One was very young, like a year old, and one was like 3 years old, and that had its difficulties. But honestly, I'd work with children a million times before I worked with animals again. The dog licking the frame was the peanut butter on Perspex trick, but that took half an hour of just coaxing this dog, getting the dog. Actually saying that, Frank was pretty obedient. He did a great job, and getting him to jump off the bed on cue, an absolute dream. The cat did not want to be there at all and was not very happy. And there's a shot about halfway through the film where the cat and the dog are together with the actors fighting in the background. And I love that shot. I think it really pulls the film together for me. But just getting them to sit still next to each other just for 5 seconds while these poor actors were shouting their heads off at each other, that was very tricky. But that final shot where the cat kind of looks towards camera and then walks off was not intended at all, and it was perfect. We absolutely loved it. So I think you've got to take what you're given with animals a little bit, especially on such a low budget kind of production.
So have you been following along with us this weekend, Christian, or you sleep through some of this? Are you aware of the haikus from Derry Public Radio?
I'm aware of the haikus. I'm sad to say I have been sleeping through most of it.
Okay, well, we'll forgive you, but as long as you know that this is going on, I do have the haiku for your film.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay. Pets are innocent, but they will show you your faults. Fork tines separate. And we give LT's Theory of Pets 5 out of 5. Woo! Blue chambray shirts. These guys are so fantastic.
Thank you so much.
I just have to read that every time.
Is there a question from the Twitterverse?
Oh, just lots of love and things that we've talked about, like how is it working with animals?
There is a lot of love, I have to tell you, because I'm looking at this screen right now, and there is definitely someone who said that this is probably the best adaptation of a short story in the world that they've ever seen. So I wanted to pass that along to you there.
So good, and like all these emojis and shit is up there. Like people love this, but
Yeah.
I mean,
it really
people
is
love
spectacular.
animals.
The music, was that something that you sourced, or was that something that was brought in? Did you have a jazz
We
player
wrote that from scratch.
Oh, wow.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's it. No, I was just saying, oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm a musician myself, and I play a couple of instruments. And I love jazz. I've always really loved jazz, and I played in a couple of jazz bands. And at the time, I was in this jazz band at the university, and a fellow bandmate, Lucas Price Novak. I approached him and said, look, we're always talking about writing music together. I've got this short film. I'd love it to have a really great soundtrack. And we spent a couple of days recording it. And the university was so accommodating. They let us use their kind of recording premises. We had friends who were, the trumpeter was a good friend. The pianist was a good friend. Lucas did the percussion. I did the guitar and the bass. And it was a lot of fun. Very stressful, but it was definitely a first-time experience for the both of us. And we both wrote a track each, and his was the cat theme, which is a brilliant. I mean, I think it's a great piece of music. I think he did a really great job on it.
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely. Knowing that you wrote the music and partially yourself for the film just makes it all the better for me, because I thought the music was such a really integral part, obviously, of the story, and it just accented everything so well. So kudos to you for that, for sure. We noticed, of course, the Pet Cemetery Easter egg. I'm sure everybody noticed that, which was a perfect little nod. Are there any other Little King Easter eggs you've got floating around in there, or was that your primary one?
I can't remember. I remember we were trying to squeeze those kind of Easter eggs in, and there's this shot with the knife being stabbed towards camera, which I think came from a King film. But yeah, when they were going to be reading these books, and one of them was just a book that I'd found in the library called War and Women, which I thought perfect. That's I couldn't get it any better. And then of course, yeah, the short story has often been linked to Pet Cemetery, and so how can you not? How can you not at that point?
Absolutely.
I don't want to make anybody totally shit their pants or anything, but if like 8 minutes ago, Stephen King retweeted about our festivals, claiming "What fun."
Well.
Off of Stephen King podcast's tweet, talking about how they were super impressed with our day one. So that has gone up during this interview. Thank you, Mr. King, whether you're watching or not.
Yes, thank you very much. Absolutely.
Yeah. My phone just like, this is happening. This is happening. Why are you not covering this? I'm like,
Well, that's very exciting for all of us.
super exciting.
So before we let you go, I just, we've been asking everybody a little bit about what their next projects are. What are you working on right now? And is there anything you can tell us about?
Yeah. So at the moment, I'm writing a lot. I'm writing a couple of TV pilots and a feature. So it'd be great to see one of those get put into the pipeline in the next year. I actually just finished on a short film that was a horror that we did as kind of a lockdown DIY kind of project, which, if you don't mind, I will. That's on my Instagram, which is Christian.Haywood. So I'd love for the viewers to go and see that. It's straight horror this time, sadly. And as much as there are animals in, I think they're a much less desirable type of so yeah. But thank you so much for playing the film. It was such a pleasure to see people's response to it, and I'm really looking forward to watching more Dollar Babies.
Oh, thank you so much for staying up late with us and being here. Super fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of love for your picture on Twitter and both in the chat. So thank you so much.
Yeah, one last question before we let you go.
We've got a couple minutes.
Yeah, and I just again because I've got I think the filmmakers all have ideas about this. If you could, we've been asking this question as well, direct any other Stephen King property and budget wasn't an issue, what would it be and why?
I mean, it's so hard not to say The Gunslinger, the Dark Tower books. I mean, they're just the epicest of books. I think if I can pick a Bachman book, I'd say The Long Walk. I think it's a real sin that book hasn't been adapted yet, and I think it would make an incredibly tense and very cinematic film. I'd love to see that be produced.
Absolutely. That's a really good choice.
It is a good choice. Someone else mentioned it yesterday too, and I apologize who that was that I can't remember, but I always remember my brother reading that book when we were younger, and he's like, yeah, that guy's got to somehow piss while he's still walking, and that's what I remember from it.
It's the small things.
Yeah, that's what's embedded in my brain.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us and for being there in a different time zone and staying up for us.
Absolutely.
It's been really such a pleasure talking with you, and we'll tweet out links to that other project as well, just so all of our viewers can get a chance to take a look. And we hope that we'll see you again sometime.
Thank you, guys. You've been so accommodating, and best of luck for the rest of the festival.
Thank you
so
much.